Okay, so let's talk about the Teamsters Union in trucking. All right, these are jobs like food service, Cisco, Pepsi, U.S. Foods, 7 Up, Dr. Pepper, what else? ABF Freight, Yellow, they went down, they're no more. I'm sure there's a few other ones out there, right? So a lot of people will tell you to go union. And me myself, before I get started, I'm pro union. I support the idea and the movement of unionizing. I think if an employer is that bad, or if an entire industry is that bad to where the workers feel like, they're mistreated and they're just taken advantage of so bad that they need to form and unionize, I think, we should have constitutional rights to do so, and that protects us from the wrath of the employer reacting to us unionizing and whatever, right? Organizing and all that, right? But it's not that simple, okay? Trucking union jobs, they're not all that they're cracked up to be, all right? On average, union jobs in general pay more money than non-union jobs, but in trucking, outside of food service, the union, it seems to work better in like Cisco, US Foods. But here's something to think about. Think about this, okay? We all think of, these UPS drivers that make like 175, 100, maybe even $200,000 a year doing, tractor trailer work. You know what I mean? Class A tractor trailer work with the hazmat endorsement, doubles and triples or whatever, right? We see them out there on the highway with their UPS trucks and their brown uniforms or whatever. Those are some of the highest paid truck drivers in the industry, are guys at UPS, right? But you don't just get hired onto UPS. Like, I've done a lot of research into this. Those guys that you see that are driving the tractor trailers at UPS, they started from the ground up at UPS. They didn't just come in off the street as a Class A truck driver. I'm sure somewhere out there in the abyss in the United States, they hired some Class A truck driver, probably from a mega carrier, and threw him in the seat. For the most part, this is where the politics in a union job comes into play. All right. So when you're in a union, right? Even Safeway out here in Northern California, it's a grocery store chain like Kroger out somewhere else. You know what I mean? Um, it's a union gig. I went to a job interview for a union gig. I didn't get it. You know what I mean? But the lady was like running it down to me. It's really political in a union. It's not like a mega carrier where you can pretty much just like walk in and start making hella money and prove yourself to the company. And as long as you're a good, reliable, safe driver, you're going to get favored in that company from the jump, right? Within your first 90 days, you could have access to the better accounts, to the better DMs, to the better routes, the better freight, the better money, the better equipment, right? If you show up on time, you don't call in sick, and you're always ready to work and you're there for your dispatcher. Unions are not like that, all right? Some say that union work um, kind of promotes people to be lazy and not really to be good, productive workers. I'm not saying union workers are lazy, but this is what I'm talking about, okay? If you go into a ABF Freight, if you go into a UPS or any of these like union jobs, right? And you show up and you're a good, reliable, safe, productive worker, you know what I mean? You're a really good driver, you're really good at your job, you're always there at their beck and call. You're not just on time, you're early, right? You're there from sun up to sundown or just whenever they need you, right? That none of that matters. You're starting off at the bottom. The way that these union jobs work is they go off of a seniority basis. And the problem with that is this. So I just described someone who comes in off the street, who gets hired, obviously with some experience. With these union jobs, you're going to need some experience if you didn't get promoted from within, like how they do at UPS and even like at 7 Up and all that, right? Which is good, right? So they'll take a warehouse worker, get him his Class A with all the endorsements that they need right there within the company, and then put him in the truck right there at the company. That's a good thing, because the reason why that's a good thing is because these union jobs, they work off of a seniority basis. So for someone at UPS to become a truck driver, they're already ranked high in the company with their seniority. They've been there for a long time. When you see these guys from UPS talking about how they made 180,000. That comes from years and years and years of being a part-time UPS worker, probably having to have another job outside of UPS to pay for their bills. So they've been starving when they were trying to get their seniority all these years. And then, once it finally cracks, once they're there for like 8 to 10 years, then they finally become a truck driver and now they're making the money. You see how that works? But up until that point, they've been starving, right? Give or take. And not just that. So let's I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to what I was saying. All right. So if you get hired at a union job like Safeway or Pepsi or UPS, right? Because you're new, you're most likely going to be on call and you're going to be covering routes that other, drivers with seniority need covered when they call out sick or when they're on, home time or vacation or PTO or medical leave or just whatever. Or they're just not there and the route needs to be covered. So you're going to be covering all these random routes. And a lot of the times you're going to be on call. So you could start in the morning, at night. Your schedule could really fluctuate, right? And it's going to be like that for a few years until you go up in seniority, even though time after time you prove yourself to be a good, reliable, safe, dependable driver that's always there for them at their beck and call, literally because you're on call on something that they usually call an extra board. Okay. You're covering routes that need to be covered. You don't have a set route, right? You might not even have an assigned truck until you get until your 5th, 8th, or 10th, or sometimes your 12th year. It all depends. The way their seniority works is when there's an opening, there's an opening. If a driver at the top retires, gets fired, or quit, that's when, the move up the ladder happens. From the warehouse on up. So the problem with that is, even though you've proven time after time again that you're a reliable, safe driver for the company, the guy who's been there for 8 to 10 years, who is probably a lazy, unsafe driver with a lot of, safety incidences, like a lot of near misses, maybe even some fender benders. You never know, because once you're in a union, you can't just get fired the same way that you can get fired at a CR England or a Night Transportation. You have union protection. So you could literally get into sometimes a real catastrophic accident and they still can't fire you because of what's in the contract and the legal protections that come with being in a part of a union that you're paying dues for. That the union, it does pay off in some ways, but not in others. So the guy that's been there for 8 years, he might actually be a drain on the company. This might be a driver that's really problematic, that is not a safe driver, that has a lot of recorded situations where they've been seen driving and on their phone and distracted and almost got into an accident time after time again. And this kind of stuff, and they might have been calling in sick a lot, you know what I mean? Scamming, I don't know, some sort of workman's comp system for the past 8 to 10 years. The company might have to been putting up with this driver and all of his or her shenanigans. And here you are, the new driver that is really productive. You're reliable, you're safe, and you're ready to work. But when you put in for time off, you're not going to get the time off. You're not going to get to take your birthday off, Christmas, Easter, New Year's, Thanksgiving. You're at the bottom of the totem pole when you start at these union jobs. But that driver that might be not that good of a driver as you, but he's been there for 8 to 10 years, they're going to get the assigned routes that pay more money, right? They're going to get the better equipment. They're going to get an assigned truck that is well maintained, because them and maybe one other driver are the only ones that are driving it, rather than all this other equipment that's being used by these drivers at the bottom of the totem pole that are running the extra board on call, that don't know, once they get off, they don't know what time they're going to start again. Sometimes it's literally answer your phone, right? And who knows if they're calling you in the middle of a sleeper berth. I mean, they shouldn't be doing that, but we have all gotten those calls from dispatch in the middle of our 10-hour sleep, whether we're OTR, regional, or local. You know what I mean? Or you get that text message, so you wake up and it's like, oh, report to work. Here's your load, and you got to go to work in like 45 minutes. So you got to scramble to get out of the house and go over there. And you're the reliable, safe driver. But the guy that's been there for like 8 to 10 years, who's really problematic, who they probably really want to get rid of, but they can't because the union is protecting not just that driver, but all the drivers, it's almost like being in a state like California that's pro tenant and not so pro landlord, right? That's pretty much what it's like. A company just can't get rid of a union worker like that. They have to have really good grounds and a really strong case to get rid of a driver like that because the union's right there to protect them, right? So these are some things that you need to, oh yeah, and one more thing. Let's talk about the money, okay? When it comes to the money in trucking in a union job, believe it or not, even though a lot of the times their pay structure is better than non-union, like they might be getting paid for literally every single thing that they do on the job compared to someone at CR England or Stevens Transport or Knight or Swift or whatever that is only getting paid, stop pay, maybe drop and hook, most likely no layover pay, maybe some detention in extreme cases, but it's mainly like cents per mile pay. So if the wheels ain't turning, they ain't earning. But in somewhere like UPS or ABF or Cisco, they get paid, their pay structure is way more inclusive, so they tend to make more money than non-union drivers. But there's people at CR England and Swift that are sometimes making more money than someone at UPS. Why? Because union jobs often come with layoff season. Sometimes these layoff seasons happen more than one time out of the year, and everything is based on seniority in these union trucking jobs, right? So you, the new driver who's running the extra board, you're going to be the first one to get laid off, even though you're reliable, you're safe, you're productive, you're always there for them at their beck and call, even if it means you don't get to go to work because there's no route for you to cover. You see what I'm saying? Because you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And then when layoff season comes, which happens at these union jobs, right? You're going to be the first one to get laid off. That guy that's been there for 8, 10, 12, 20 years, they're going to be the very last ones to get laid off because they're at the top of the totem pole in seniority. I've never heard about layoff seasons at Knight Transportation, at Swift, at CR England, at a JB Hunt, at Stevens Transport, PAM Trucking, right? Like these mega carrier OTR trucking companies. I've never heard of layoff season. The only time there's a layoff season at a mega carrier non-union trucking outfit is when you get into a catastrophic accident and they're just gonna let you go. Or if you're just really problematic and you're not dependable, you're not reliable, you have too many recorded safety events, then they let you go. That's the layoff season, is when they fire you. But if you're a good, dependable worker at a non-union company, as long as you're down to make money, you could start pretty much at the top compared to, someone at ABF Freight or at Safeway or Pepsi or whatever who's running the extra board. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be starting off at the bottom, right? Food service tends to be more reliable. Even with layoff seasons, they tend to have less layoffs than someone like a UPS or ABF Freight or something that's like outside of food service. Food service, because their volume is so big throughout the year, right? I don't really hear too much about layoffs at Cisco and US Foods when they're, covered by the Teamsters. Like those Teamster jobs with food service and even at Pepsi and 7-Up, they're pretty solid from what I hear. But, these guys at UPS that are telling you that they make all this money, what they're not telling you is they had to start off at the bottom, right? But you going to CR England, as long as you're down to work, you're down to stay out, you're down to put in the miles, you could make $100,000 in your first year moving forward and forever and stack up way more money, than the guy at UPS who's just now coming into some money 10 years into their career at UPS. while you've been at CR England stacking paper this whole time. So who is really making more money? It almost seems like these people that are making $180,000 at UPS or ABF Freight or whatever, they're kind of making up for lost time from when they were at the bottom of the totem pole in seniority at their union trucking job, which comes with good things like a pension, company paid health care. All of those are good things. But if you can't pay your rent, is it really that good? Is it really that good? Or is it, or are you going to be better off, you know, wheels turning, earning, turning and burning over there at Knight Transportation, Swift, England, JB Hunt from the jump? So these are some things to keep in mind when it comes to union truck driving. All right. You're protected. You're most likely going to have to go through like a lengthy process to get fired, dude. You could literally get into like a physical altercation at your job and probably like not even get fired. As crazy as that sounds, because the Teamsters union is strong, dude. These companies, they can't just get rid of some union driver like that, right? The same way that England or Knight could or whatever, they just call you and, we got to depart ways, right? But at the same time, I mean, dude, to keep it real, like you really got to mess up to get fired from like a mega carrier trucking company. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to be unsafe or whatever, dude. But this is just something to think about. You could make a lot of money at a mega carrier. You could make a lot of money at a union job, but not from the jump. When you're starting off, you're going to be starving, and it depends on what market you're in. Some markets, like the Northern California market, the Southern California market, the down south, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Midwest, East Coast, whatever market, you know what I mean? The Pacific Northwest market, these different markets have different layoff seasons, and some have more layoff seasons than more layoff seasons than others. I'm talking about like the union trucking jobs. So an ABF Freight or a UPS, they're going to have more layoffs on the West Coast or the East Coast or the Midwest, depending, right? And sometimes it's random, just with market fluctuations. And if they hire too many drivers, there's layoffs. Layoffs happen. And if you're at the bottom of the totem pole, like I said, dude, you're going to be the first one to get laid off. And this isn't just true about trucking. This is the same thing that happens in like the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Plumbers Union, the Pipe Fitters Union. When slow season, happens, the guys at the bottom of the totem pole, the apprentices, right, and the entry-level truck drivers, they're the first ones to get laid off. Yeah, you come back because you're a part of the union, but you don't know when you're going to come back. You don't know how long the layoff season is going to happen. Meanwhile, this dude over here at CR England is making $100,000 on the Dollar General account, and he's a driver trainer, so he's probably making like 150 grand in his first year. You know what I'm saying? So it's just something to think about. Union trucking, let me know what you think about this in the comment section. And am I wrong? Am I on the money? Do I sound like I'm hating on union jobs, or am I just trying to let you guys know, about, union trucking and what to really expect? Because these are things that pro-union guys, they might touch on it, but they're not really going to tell you the full scale of how these union jobs are structured and why you might not want to go that route, right? Because here's the thing about a pension. Like, having a pension is good. If all jobs had a pension, that would be great. I would be in favor for, the President Trump to swipe his pen and, all employers have to provide their employees with a pension. I would be the first one, giving a round of applause for that. But here's the thing, dude. You don't need a pension to have a good retirement, dude. If you're out here making smart financial decisions, smart financial investments, you could be making 150 grand, for the next 30, 35 years at your career at CR England or Knight Transportation or whatever. And you could take that money, especially if you're like living out of the truck, and you can invest your little butt off, dude, in index funds, mutual funds, real estate. And yeah, you don't have a pension, but you could build up a solid real estate portfolio of rental properties and index funds. Dude, you're making 100 grand living out of the truck And there's no like proving yourself to the employer like for seniority and all that. No, you just go in there, and as long as you're down to make money, the money's there for you, right? So it's just something to think about. Be sure to smash the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel, and peace out.